So in this video, we are going to look at more PowerPoint slides on the history of HTML and more on the introduction of HTML, but we'll also be jumping into our source code editor, Atom, which you should have downloaded last class. So now we're going to go into Atom and we are going to start writing some HTML code, so make sure you have all that set up. All right, let's get started here. So we're going to begin with the history of HTML. In the previous video, we talked briefly on the history of HTML. So HTML is a child of SGML, which is Standard Generalized Markup Language. HTML is relatively easy to learn, especially compared to SGML. So that's why it was easily and quickly picked up in the mainstream with the evolution of the World Wide Web. Then came the browser wars, which made HTML become more complex and fragmented. This happened because of the competition between all the different companies that are out there that came up with different HTML tags and without following the standard ways of doing so. So HTML started with, of course, html1, which was just limiting and very simple text. No images, just text and links, not too interesting at all. And HTML2 came out in September 1995. HTML3 came out in 97. So by that time, most of the browser-specific tags introduced by Netscape has been omitted. So again, this goes back to the browser wars, where during that period of browser wars where browser companies were in competition with each other, they were trying to be better than one another, so they're trying to make their own browser be more interesting and better, instead of working together as a community to making sure that websites would be the same on every different browser. Okay, so this is the beginning of applying, coming together to work on having the same standards so that things are more consistent. So in December 1999, HTML4 came out, and styling tags and attributes then became deprecated. So what this means is, during the browser wars, browser companies came up with their own style tags. They started adding style into the HTML, and this should never be done, because HTML is really just for the structure and the content, not for the style. The style should always be left to the CSS. And also there were attributes that should not have been added in there. So this, starting 1999, was slowly started to be deprecated. So they're starting to do away with this. They're trying to basically phase it out. So styling then became separated from HTML starting 1999, around that time. Okay, so there we have HTMLs for content and structure, and then they're separating style out of that, moving it to CSS, and CSS should be the one that deals with all the styles for the web page. And then in January 2000, XHTML was the standard, and now since 2012, HTML5 is now the standard for HTML. All right, so HTML in starting 2012, it was the W3C candidate recommendation, so it was recommended, not yet the official standard then. The community has not reached agreement then. It is now it is, it has been for a while, since 2012 then. Now it is the official standard. Everything should be in HTML5. Of course, you have older websites that do not have HTML5, and they're still on older versions of HTML. That is, of course, still out there. All right, so I talked a bit about web standards in the previous slide. So it's important to understand standards compliance in web design. This is important because of the bad habits that came from the browser wars. The standards make sure that designers and developers abide by rules, which means using clean and logical HTML or XHTML for marking up content. Make sure that they use CSS for presentation, and make sure that they use a single document object model for scripting. Okay, so the current web standards, the gist of it, the basics of it is that think of it as a layer cake and think of it as 3 layers. So you have the structural layer, which is the HTML, which marks up the document, which is the foundation for other layers. So the very structure should only have to do with the skeleton of the content. So the content and what the content is. Is it a header? Is it a paragraph? Is it a footer? Is it links? So that is the only things that HTML should do, which is to give it structure to the web page. In terms of presentation, like the icing on the cake, how the document should look on the screen, what color it is, what is the background, how big is the font, things like that should be left to CSS. CSS should deal with the presentation or the style of the web page. And then you have the behavior layer, which scripting and programming that adds interactivity to the site. So this should be handled by PHP or JavaScript to add interactivity to the site, and that is a separate layer. So we're not learning about this layer, we're not doing JavaScript in this course, but it's important to understand that it is one of the layers of websites. Okay, so in this course we're going to learn structural layer and the presentation layer. Structural being the HTML and the presentation being the CSS, which has to do with the style of the page. Okay, so now I would like you to open up your web editor for the following exercises, and I'll be going back and forth. Okay, so remember that HTML documents are basically just text files that contain tags. So what are tags? We looked at that in the previous video. So like we have the HTML tag, we have the head tag, we have the body tag, we learned about the p tag, which is a paragraph tag. So basically tags mark up HTML elements, okay? And your HTML document must have a .html file extension. Okay, so tags are surrounded by angle brackets. So for example, p tag, this is the start tag, and this is the close tag, okay? So start tag looks like this, and the end tag has a / in it, okay, inside of the angle bracket. So HTML standard says that everything must have an end tag and it must be in lowercase. Okay, just make everything in lowercase from now on, just to make your life simple. Even when you're naming files, naming folders, please have everything in lowercase all the time. Okay, so then we have the element. So an HTML element consists of a start tag, content in the middle, and an end tag. So this is an element. This whole thing here is an element. An element has a start tag, content in the middle, and an end tag. Okay. Of course, we have exceptions to the rules. We have empty tags. So this is an example of an empty tag. This makes it so there's a line break. So inside, so there's no, so it gives it like a space. So the next line will go to, so the next content will go to the next line. So it's kind of like like using the return key on your keyboard, making things go to the next line. So it doesn't have any content in the middle. So it's a start and an end in itself. This HR is a horizontal line, okay, across the page. So again, it doesn't have a start and end. This one is where you use to insert an image, okay, and it doesn't have a start and end. It just has the start, okay. You have something called attributes, where you can have an attribute inside of a tag. So remember the last tag here, the image tag here. This is an image tag, but inside of that, it doesn't really mean anything on its own. Okay, it needs to point to a source. So you point to a source using an attribute. This is an example of an attribute. You can have multiple attributes. You can have more than one. Each attribute will be different, of course. So this attribute calls to the source of the picture, src, so source equals, and then in quotations, the name of the picture, where that picture is. Okay, picture.jpg. Okay, and you can also have nested tags. Okay, so this is an example of a nested tag. You have a paragraph here. This is a paragraph. You can see this word paragraph is inside of the tag strong. The tag strong tells the browser that this is information that needs to be emphasized because this is important information. Okay, so